Imagine a $1 trillion loss in market value for a single tech company, all because of a trade war that began with a simple toll on U.S. trucks. What happens when a small Canadian province stands up to the U.S. and challenges the global economic order? The answer is a ripple effect that shakes Silicon Valley, threatens U.S. dominance in AI, and even risks the livelihoods of millions across North America. This is the story of how British Columbia's tolls on U.S. freight trucks ignited a chain reaction that nobody saw coming. For decades, Canada quietly played the role of a diplomatic neighbor, abiding by international trade agreements and keeping a low profile. But when former President Donald Trump imposed aggressive tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel tariffs that hit a vital $16 billion industry, Canada's patience finally broke. British Columbia's Premier, David Eby, stood before the Assembly and announced a defiant move: strategic tolls on U.S. freight trucks passing through the province, marking a shift toward economic independence from the U.S. This was more than just a financial decision. It was a bold statement, one that challenged not just Trump's tariffs, but America's economic hegemony itself. And it didn't stop there. The tolls were part of a broader strategy to reduce Canada's $500 billion trade dependency on the U.S. and prioritize internal markets. But the most shocking consequence? In the aftermath, tech giant NVIDIA lost $589 billion in a single day. And in the following months, its stock plummeted by a staggering $1 trillion, an economic catastrophe that no one saw coming. Stay tuned as we break down how these events are transforming the global economy, the fragility of U.S. tech industries, and the lasting impact these changes will have on your daily life. From Silicon Valley's meltdown to your pocketbook, this trade war is reshaping the future of business, tech, and geopolitics. Eby's counterattack wasn't merely about imposing tolls. The strategic tolls were just a piece of the puzzle. As part of this bold move, British Columbia shifted focus to interprovincial trade. The goal? To reduce the province's dependency on U.S. markets by developing new, more self-sustaining trade relationships across Canada. Canada's challenge wasn't just with tariffs. It was also about ensuring its long-term economic survival. If Canadian businesses could look beyond the U.S. for partners and markets, they could insulate themselves from the volatility caused by political decisions south of the border. One of the key components of this new strategy was a low-carbon fuel mandate implemented by British Columbia. This legislation aimed to prioritize domestic energy sources, cutting out U.S. suppliers, and thereby making the province more self-reliant and less vulnerable to U.S. tariff impositions. These moves weren't just symbolic. They were designed to shift the economic power balance, showing that Canada would no longer sit idly by as the U.S. made arbitrary demands. While British Columbia's actions were sending a clear message in the trade realm, a much larger crisis was brewing in Silicon Valley, one that would reveal how fragile the U.S. economy was under Trump's trade policies. The first victim of these policies, NVIDIA, the world's leading AI chipmaker. Before the trade war, NVIDIA was a beacon of innovation, valued at over $1 trillion. However, as Trump's tariffs escalated and sanctions on China began to bite, NVIDIA's stock plunged by more than 5% in just a few months. What caused this drop? The core of NVIDIA's business relied heavily on global supply chains and access to critical materials, such as rare earth metals from China and advanced semiconductor technology. When Trump imposed tariffs, NVIDIA found itself cut off from key Chinese markets and faced rising production costs, all while competing against other countries that were increasingly investing in their own AI chip manufacturing capabilities. More devastating was the export ban on chips to China, one of NVIDIA's biggest customers. As global chip shortages worsened and China's technological development accelerated, NVIDIA's previously unassailable market dominance was suddenly threatened. This led to a massive market sell-off, which wiped out $600 billion in stock value overnight. The immediate aftermath of this was staggering. Investors panicked, and tech stocks began to follow NVIDIA's downward spiral. NVIDIA's downfall was symbolic of something larger: the fragility of the U.S. economic hegemony under Trump's erratic trade policies. But the fallout didn't stop with NVIDIA. Prior to Trump's policies, global trade operated smoothly. Companies like NVIDIA relied on the integration of global supply chains, where materials and products flowed freely across borders. However, under the economic nationalism promoted by Trump, these supply chains began to fracture. Trade relationships were scrutinized, and tariffs were raised on goods that had long been exchanged without incident. In particular, the U.S.'s decoupling from China had significant consequences. By imposing trade restrictions on Chinese technology companies, Trump isolated U.S. businesses from one of the most significant technology markets in the world. This decoupling didn't just affect American companies, it sparked a chain reaction that shook global markets. While China developed its own domestic semiconductor industry, the U.S. struggled to maintain its dominance in sectors like AI and cloud computing. To make matters worse, the U.S. was not the only country retaliating. As tariffs increased, Canadian businesses started looking inward to domestic markets, prioritizing local suppliers, and reducing their dependence on the U.S. This shift in the supply chain forced U.S. companies to compete in new ways as they struggled to maintain market share in Canada and beyond. The AI revolution that NVIDIA had helped spearhead in the U.S. suddenly found itself in jeopardy. The company's competitive advantage, its monopoly on high-performance graphics processing units (GPUs), was being eroded. The reason? The global semiconductor shortage, worsened by Trump's policies, coupled with increasing Chinese competition in the AI space. NVIDIA's market collapse was more than just about a single company's fortunes. It reflected a larger trend. U.S. technological supremacy, once unquestioned, was now being challenged by China and other countries like South Korea and Taiwan. NVIDIA's decline also highlighted the fragility of the global tech industry, as other companies and countries raced to fill the void. NVIDIA's market value, which had reached a staggering $1 trillion, suddenly lost nearly 17% of its value, dropping by $589 billion in a single day. This kind of loss was unprecedented in the tech world and sent shockwaves throughout global markets, showcasing how political decisions could reverberate far beyond borders. The implications of these shifts aren't just felt by governments and investors, they affect everyday people too. For instance, consider how changes in the tech sector affect you. Tech companies like NVIDIA power devices that people use daily, from smartphones to self-driving cars. The collapse of NVIDIA led to higher prices for technology products, affecting consumers who rely on affordable tech for their personal and professional lives. For Canadians, these changes could translate to more job opportunities within the domestic tech and green energy sectors, especially as Canadian businesses seek to re-establish trade relationships with other countries outside the U.S. By shifting to more local and diverse trade networks, Canada could see increased economic stability, more investments in local infrastructure, and potentially lower unemployment in sectors that were previously dependent on U.S. supply chains. However, for U.S. workers, the impact could be harsher. The economic disruptions caused by Trump's tariffs, combined with the increasing technological competition from China, could mean fewer job opportunities in the tech sector and higher prices for goods, especially if supply chains continue to be disrupted. The effects of these policies aren't just confined to the U.S. and Canada. Global trade is more interconnected than ever before, and as countries start to redefine their economic relationships, the entire world economy is adjusting. China has been investing heavily in its domestic tech sector, ramping up AI chip production and reducing its reliance on U.S. technology. Meanwhile, European nations have started to rethink their trade strategies, realizing that relying too heavily on the U.S. could be dangerous. Countries like Germany and France are seeking out new trade partnerships with China, which is fast becoming the new epicenter of technological innovation. The events triggered by the trade war, initially set in motion by Trump's policies and countered by Canada's bold actions, have reshaped not only trade dynamics, but the very fabric of global economic relationships. Canada's strategic tolls on U.S. trucks were more than just a financial move. They were a clear statement of economic autonomy, showing the world that Canada would no longer passively accept external pressures. At the same time, the collapse of NVIDIA once a titan in the tech industry, revealed just how vulnerable the US economy had become under unpredictable trade tactics. The stock drop, which wiped out $589 billion overnight, wasn't just a corporate failure. It was a wake-up call for industries and governments around the world. But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new global economic landscape. While the US may have lost some of its dominant grip on tech and trade, Canada is positioning itself to lead in self-sufficiency and new trade partnerships. The road ahead will be filled with challenges. But one thing is clear: the world is evolving, and countries like Canada are making sure they aren't just following along, they're leading the charge toward a more balanced, resilient economy. The bottom line: the dynamics of global trade are shifting, and the ripple effects are being felt everywhere. From tech giants to everyday consumers, the impact of these changes is reshaping how we do business, how we consume, and how we plan for the future. So the real question is, what's next? Stay tuned, because the next chapter in this economic saga is just getting started.
Export facilities globally by 2025. The project alone is expected to export up to 14 million tons of LNG per year, significantly increasing Canada's energy export capacity. For Canadians, this growing demand for their energy exports could lead to more jobs in the energy sector. Alberta and British Columbia, which are home to Canada's oil and gas reserves, could see a boost in employment in sectors like construction, engineering, and energy infrastructure. However, the increase in energy exports also brings environmental concerns. Local communities, especially those in the extraction zones, may experience altered daily lives, with possible disruptions due to construction, changes to local landscapes, and environmental impacts from fossil fuel extraction. For Europeans, Canadian energy offers a more stable and predictable supply compared to other global suppliers. This could stabilize energy prices in the medium to long term. The EU might also find Canadian energy more sustainable and reliable, which would benefit consumers through more affordable and secure energy sources, especially as Canada's environmental regulations are stricter than other major exporters. Chapter 5. Canada's shift toward Europe and Asia. While Canada is focusing on supplying more energy to Europe, it is also expanding its energy exports to Asia. Countries like China and Japan have been increasing their demand for Canadian oil and LNG. And Canada's energy export agreements with Asian nations are expected to grow by 10% annually over the next 5 years. By 2027, Canada's energy exports to Asia are projected to reach over $10 billion. This shift toward Asia is significant for the global energy market, as it adds a new dynamic to Canada's energy strategy, diversifying its export markets and reducing its reliance on any one region. For Canadians, this shift toward Asian markets means potentially greater revenue from global energy sales, which could result in stronger economic stability and increased job opportunities in the energy sector. However, this also poses challenges for local communities in terms of environmental impact, as expanding energy exports might lead to increased industrial activity and higher pollution levels. For Europeans, the shift toward Asia may mean more competition for Canadian energy, potentially driving up prices in Europe. Chapter 6. Canada's trade with the EU. A growing partnership. Canada and the EU have significantly strengthened their economic ties since the implementation of the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement (CETA) in 2017. Bilateral trade between the two partners has surged by 66% since then, laying the foundation for even stronger energy cooperation. With Canada poised to increase its oil and LNG exports to the EU, this partnership is likely to continue growing, benefiting both regions. For Canadians, this deeper trade relationship could lead to stronger economic growth, with more opportunities in sectors such as energy, manufacturing, and technology. For Europeans, it could translate into a more stable and diversified energy supply, with lower long-term energy costs and greater energy security, meaning less fluctuation in energy prices during global crises. As we've seen, the shifting energy dynamics between Russia, the EU, the US, and Canada are not just a matter of politics or economics, they are shaping the way we live our daily lives. From higher energy bills in Europe to potential political uncertainties affecting global supply chains, the ripple effects of these changes will touch us all in one way or another. The increasing importance of Canadian energy exports to the EU and other global markets is a clear sign that the landscape is evolving rapidly. Whether it's in the form of job creation, rising costs, or even environmental impacts, these changes are a sign of a much larger shift happening. right before our eyes. The road ahead may be uncertain, but one thing is for sure: global energy partnerships are more important than ever, and they will continue to shape our world in profound ways.